Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session discussing the democratization of UX research. With me today is a panel, and I'll introduce you to those folks in 1 second. But just first, a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. This is, as the title suggests, about how we can make UX research activities, learning about our customers' activities, more broadly adopted across an organization, and why we would do that and how we would go about doing that is the topic for today. So before I give you a bit more of an introduction, I want to introduce our panelists. My name is Michael Maternahan. I'm a UX design team lead at Bloomberg, and I'll pass now to Ken Cohn.
Hi there, I'm Ken Cohn. I'm a product manager and I look after our news automation projects at Bloomberg.
Thank you, Ken. And Suzanne?
Hi, my name is Suzanne Zor. I am a product manager for our document search and analytics platform.
And finally, Adam Lin.
Hi, Adam Lin. I am a product manager focusing on equity analytics and market analysis tools.
All right, great. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. You may have noticed there that the panel consists of product managers. Fully intentional and very much representative of the approach we've taken to democratizing UX research. And that's to be fully engaged and fully teaming with product managers and engineers on making this effort to democratize client research across the firm. So that panel is going to talk to you about their experiences today of what they learned from the campaign to do that, and what it's enabled them to do a little bit differently and how it's impacted their decision making. But first, a little bit more about the program. We started just over a year ago, and this effort is actually parented by a couple of initiatives in Bloomberg. One is to look at different aspects of the product development process that we have and where we could make improvements, and learning about our customers was one of the key programs in that. The second is part of our initiative to look at how we do product management. And again, learning about our customers fits really well into that. So the campaign itself, which we call Learning About Our Customers, has two parents essentially. And that gives us a great deal of organizational buy-in and sponsorship, which my first point about this whole campaign is that's essential to the effort to democratize UX research in an organization. So just a couple of other points to make before we kick off. It was a realization that we do not have enough UX researchers, and we'll never have enough to do all the research that we want to do. That in fact, a lot of what UX research does can be boiled down to what we call some mini methods that enable lots of different people to participate in that sort of activity. It's also an acknowledgement that a lot of client interaction is happening already. The product managers and the ones you'll speak to in a second know the most about customers already, and they spend the most time with customers already. So giving them some techniques to refine that a little bit, and you'll hear about the effect that that's had, makes a lot of sense. And of course, I don't need to tell this audience, getting things right at the start of a project or a product improvement makes a huge difference to the final outcome, perhaps the biggest difference. So we have gathered together a bunch of UX research methods, interviewing, observation, walkthrough, usability testing, usage data, and using sales and service as a surrogate for the customer or a channel to the customer. Those are our 6 methods. And right now we've concluded a round of training on each of those 6 methods. And this group of people that we're going to talk to now have been the ones amongst the other 200 product managers who have gone through that training. So without further ado, let's ask the most pressing question, I think, to Ken Cohn, which is, okay, Bloomberg is an incredibly successful organization. We have a very dominant product in the financial services marketplace. We have 330,000 odd subscribers to that product, a very successful product. Ken, why did we feel the need to address this topic of how we go about learning about our customers?
Sure. Okay. So, well, several ways of answering that, but let me attack it this way. So our experience has been that if you ask somebody what they want, when you ask a client, what do you want when you're requesting us to build something for you, when you want a product, an application built, that they really won't be able to articulate it clearly. You know, they'll say, what I need is this, and then you'll build something. They say, well, no, not really. We really wanted that, and it's got to have this thing and that thing. So at Bloomberg, we have so much in-house experience. So in many cases, we pretty much know what's required when a client says, please build me X, because our colleagues inside Bloomberg used to be our clients or used to work in similar roles to our clients. So instead of asking client, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want, we've been pretty successful as a company understanding what we think they need, building it for them, giving it to them, and then iterating on it afterward. And that's worked pretty successfully for us based on results, but not always. In one current project that I'm working on, I'm not going to go into the details because of competitive issues, but in one product that we're working on right now, we figured we kind of know what was required to meet the request that is coming from many clients for this application. In fact, I already knew all the pieces of information that I thought we would assemble to meet the requirements of the project. And then when I went to Michael and his team to consult with them, they recommended we try a new approach, this deep learning about our customers. And I have to say, I was initially very skeptical. You know, I've got, 30 years plus of journalism experience. I think I know how to interview somebody and get answers that I want. But they said, no, you're not going to do it the way you interview somebody for a news story. You're going to ask open-ended, unbiased questions. In other words, you're going to ask questions and give them the air to really allow your clients to tell you, I think this is important, I think that is important. And you're going to do a lot of interviews. You're not just going to be talking to one person who you happen to get a request from. You're going to talk to a lot of people in a lot of different roles, and you're going to find out a lot of information. So again, I was initially pretty skeptical about this, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong about my suppositions. By conducting really in-depth interviews with more than 24 clients, we learned so much about the requirements for this product, as well as a very strong potential demand for the product. The interviews showed us that clients were interested in seeing information I hadn't even considered including in it. And in some instances, data that I thought was critically important was completely ignored. They just don't care about it. So in other words, one of the things that we learned through this process is the product that I was preparing to build wasn't nearly good enough. So as far as developing our new application, the new approach that we've taken resulted in the slower delivery of a product. Had we started doing what I thought we should be doing, we'd be done by now. But by not doing it that way, by doing these in-depth interviews, doing the research, what we believe is that this is worth the time, because the knowledge that we've collected from these learning about our customers' interviews, what that's allowing us to do is build from a stronger foundation. So I could have built a product. Notice that I'm using the indefinite article a. Instead, what we're going to do is build the product that clients really need. Definite article there, the product that they want. So it's harder, it's longer, and clearly we had to kind of adjust the way we go about doing these interviews and this research from what we're used to doing, again, assuming that we know what the client wants better than what they tell us, and being open-ended and open-minded and not being biased in our questions. But again, what that probably leads us to, or we hope it leads us to, is a better foundation for building the product that we really should be building in the first place.
Great. Thanks so much, Ken, for sharing that experience. So what Ken is describing also was a project mechanism by which we actually developed the mini method for interviewing as part of this campaign. So I said that the product managers and engineers have been heavily involved in this whole effort, and that's part of it. Ken and his team actually tried out some of our mini interviewing method tools, not just the interviews itself, the preparation for interviews, and then analyzing the interview notes, and then using other methods such as walkthrough and other things. So Ken and his team have very much been part of the development of the content of the training. Now, a couple of folks who have been involved in that training and have gone through the interview method is Suzanne and Adam. So starting with Suzanne, tell us about the sorts of things you have learned from the Learning About Our Customers campaign and how that's affected some of the projects you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So I would say first and foremost, I'll echo what Ken said. It's really about learning how to have a better conversation with your customer, not just a conversation with your customer. When you're really looking for feedback, I would say now I'm more focused on actively listening to what they're telling me and what their pain points are. And instead of immediately trying to fill a gap if they struggle to articulate what they're trying to tell me, I give them the space, the air, as Ken said, to really put into words what they're trying to accomplish in their workflows. And I know it sounds simple and it is so obvious when you really, sit back and think about it, but it takes consistent practice to really do it and not fall back into those bad habits, like asking a leading question, which is going to introduce, that bias that inevitably as product managers you sometimes have. As Ken said, we often think we know what the solution is that we want to offer in a product. And so it's really helped us to take that step back and put together a much more comprehensive plan to solve the client need rather than, putting out probably an inferior product at the first pass.
Great, thanks so much for that. And I think, as you said, the fact is you're talking to customers all the time anyway, and not rocket science of a different of approach, but there is an epiphany, isn't there, where it kind of flood of insight starts to come through. The customer can, in fact, tell you what their needs are, maybe not directly and maybe not too far in the future, but it's quite amazing, isn't it, the kind of data that comes through. So,
Michael, if I could jump in for a minute, but it really is important. Part of the process, and you might want to elaborate on this some more, is when we're going ahead and preparing for this process, there's a lot of work to get started, and you have to prepare a script. You have to prepare a bunch of questions. You have to review the questions very carefully to make sure they're not biased and that you're not leading the person. So this is hard. This is not let's just have a conversation for 15 minutes with a client. This is lining up the client, getting them to commit the time, preparing for weeks in advance in terms of being able to make sure that the research we're doing is actually going to yield unbiased results. And again, I used the term before, give them the air to talk. We're so used to jumping in. We're so used to solving problems. We're so used to saying, oh, I know where you're going. No. You got to shut up. I mean, as you can tell from the way I'm talking, that's for many of us, or at least for me, that's not the easiest thing to do in the world, right? So,
on that note, Ken, I'm going to pass.
Yeah, right.
Just kidding. I'm going to pass over to Adam and get some thoughts on his perspective on that. Perhaps, Adam, I know you came from a sales background into a product management role. So, tell us about your experiences of learning about customers. But if you can, please reflect on the differences between selling and learning.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I spent about 9 years in the sales side of the organization, as well as the support side of the organization, as a specialist focusing on our clients. And I was a person who, thought he knew exactly what the clients need. So I would often hide some of our product gaps by selling workarounds and not actually addressing the issues that would need to be solved, just really going for the end goal, which is adoption or sale or the displacement of a competitor. So for years, like anything that you do, you build up a muscle memory and it becomes very second nature to have a conversation in a particular way. What I had to struggle with initially when I joined a product about a year and a half ago now, I was retrained in the way that I actually conducted an entire conversation. Now, I found that to be liberating, because candidly, I used to take product managers out on meetings with me to hear client feedback for certain areas where there was no workaround. There is no solution. So we need to actually have new product development to address a direct client situation. And from observation, I would see that the product managers would do a lot of the talking, as Ken and Suzanne both noted. It has been the history of the role, and as you sit back and think about what that does to the client, it makes them feel like they don't know what they actually want. And the product manager who did 80% of the talking in the meeting actually comes back to the office saying, that was a great meeting. We know exactly what they want. You didn't even talk to the guy or girl. It doesn't, it's a one-sided conversation. So for me, not having a ton of time to develop those habits myself, and coming from, a very customer-centric background, I've been, trying to fight through my own tendencies, which is to position a solution and hear from clients as much as possible, and really use the tried and true 80-20 rule. Let them do 80% of the talking, you do 80% of the listening, and the more prepared you are to go in with an open mind and not have a bias as to what your outcome of that meeting is, the better the results. And like Ken, I have a couple of projects in flight that are benefiting from this, where we won't be rolling out a thing that we think is going to be good because we know better than the client. We're hopefully going to roll something out that actually is useful in their workflow because we've heard it directly from them and we didn't steer them to what we wanted them to say.
That's great. And Adam, it strikes me that one of the challenges for product managers in most organizations is that their role typically includes both modes: selling, solving problems, and managing the product today, but also learning about it and being insightful and listening for the product in the future. And often, sometimes those meetings are trying to accomplish both, and sometimes even in the same sentence, you're trying to accomplish both. So it's great to hear how you're teasing those two different modes out. But Adam, you mentioned that you've got a couple of live projects where you're adopting, a more listening approach. Can you give us some examples, without giving away any proprietary information, of how your product decisions are different based on the experiences that you've had?
Sure. We actually, I don't want to speak too much about things that are currently in flight because it's still a little bit early, but I can speak to, roads not taken. Earlier in the year, we had a very simple idea, not a really revolutionary thing that I'm going to be sharing. If somebody's looking at a data point, they might want to see how that data point got to the current data point. What's the history? How do we arrive? What happened before? Very, very, very basic thing that makes sense on the surface. In the course of interviewing around 30 clients, we actually learned that the amount of complexity into that very, very simple thing was going to create more questions than answers that it was intended to solve. So in the course of interviewing clients, I got a reality check, and we didn't go forward with spending the time that engineers would have otherwise spent on building something that would have marginally impacted people's workflows and ultimately would have wasted an opportunity for Bloomberg to do the right thing down the line when we're more prepared to do the right thing. So, this goes both ways. It can influence you to build the right thing. It can also influence you to prevent yourself from building the wrong thing. And for me, that was a little bit of an eye-opening experience because, as a newer product manager, I don't have that many, wins on the board, so to speak. And, it would be nice to put something out there that clients love and are using. And I could say, hey, I helped design that. But sometimes the best thing to do is take, the opposite approach and be prudent with what we actually put out.
Could I comment on that a little bit too, Michael? Could I add something to that? Yeah. So one of the other benefits of this is that if you have the evidence that you've spoken to, as Adam did, 30 people, this gives you a lot more heft in dealing with colleagues, right? So now instead of being able, I'm imagining me doing the same thing that Adam did. My manager says, I want you to do something like X, Y, Z. You go and you talk to 30 people and you say, look, we're not going to do this, right? And the manager is going to come back and say, well, I just told you I want you to do it. Yeah, but what you told me to do isn't really what is going to be helpful. And I know this empirically based upon these conversations. Likewise, if you've done that research and you then need to go to colleagues and say, I need your help, right? I can't do this alone. This is a really good product and I need your assistance and your resources to help me do this. And they say, I got my own business plan. I don't have the time for this. And you can say, yeah, but look at all this evidence I've collected. Look at all this evidence I've amassed. You need to change your expectations as well for what you're going to do, because we got to do this instead. So it's not just a matter of collecting the information so we know what to do. It's collecting information so it helps us in the organization and it lets the organization do what the organization should do.
Right. Excellent. Great point, Ken.
Hey, and on top of that, actually.
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne. I'm just about to turn to you.
I was going to say, actually, to add on, what I was thinking is, right, one of the benefits of this work from home virtual meeting environment has been that we've been able to include larger numbers of stakeholders in these customer interviews, where typically you would go to someone's office. You would not want to show up with an army of people where they feel very intimidated to, speak their truth about, what their pain points are. So you can have your development team. You could have, like Ken said, potentially another business area that you're trying to get buy-in so that they understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and what the customer is really articulating to you in that feedback. And it helps to build that cohesive plan and motivation for all of the product areas and stakeholders that you're doing the right thing and you're solving these real customer problems, especially for engineers. It's not just, hey, my product manager is coming to me with a list of requirements that's 5 pages long. They first heard it from the customer, and now they understand the genesis of what it is that we're asking them to do.
Excellent. Wonderful point, Suzanne. And we'll come back to this topic of how having a more connected relationship with customers through learning about them in more open ways and its impact on the broader organization. But before we do that, I did want to let the audience know that you can ask us questions. It's right underneath the video streaming for this session. You can hit ask a question and I'll be monitoring those. We're going to talk for about another 7 minutes or so, and then we'll go into a Q&A session where we can look at some of those questions. But by all means, start firing those in there and I'll start looking at them. But I'm staying with you, Suzanne. I wanted to ask if you could give us some specific examples, again, without disclosing anything proprietary, about how your product decisions have been improved by learning about customers in a different way.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And actually, one of our most recent research projects, what we've found is actually that we are finding customers are struggling with some of the basic design patterns, I would say, that Bloomberg overall has adopted. And what we're really looking to tease out is that happening only because it's in our specific search application, or does it have broader implications for the business? And so by doing those interviews and gaining that empirical evidence and feedback from the customer, we're able to then take it to the broader design teams and say, right, from a search perspective, maybe we need to look and do something different than what we've adopted, more broadly across the Bloomberg platform. And it's really given us that avenue to try to address some challenges that, because we're following patterns, are actually introducing complexities for our users.
Excellent. Thanks, Susanna. And staying with you again, we've talked about some of the things you three have been learning and how it's changed your approach and the decisions that you've been making. But how has it affected you personally? Are there any kind of personal reflections on doing things differently and what that has meant?
Yeah, if I were completely honest with you, I would say that the process to start makes you feel a bit vulnerable, right? You're going in thinking you have all the answers, you have all of this experience under your belt, and when you're going in and talking to the customer and not pitching them, but rather really engaging with them in this interviewing method, you're able to hear where their challenges and pain points are. Could be on something that you've previously designed and put out to market. And that's humbling, right? It's to hear your customer struggling with something that you had thought you had done right the first time. But I will say that, through it all, it's actually going through the process. It's given us a lot more confidence now that we are on the right track. We've gotten an immense amount of excitement coming back through, the walkthroughs, revisiting the interviews that we've done. And we're really confident now that we're on the right track to build the solutions that we need.
Excellent, excellent. So if you don't mind me summarizing, from vulnerability to humility to empowered.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic journey. And Adam, same question to you. Any reflections on your personal experience of doing all this?
I realized that I fill dead air. Shouldn't do that. If there is a break in the conversation, I used to throw a little Bloomberg sales razzle dazzle at the client, and there would be no break in the conversation. It's a little uncomfortable to ask a very open-ended prompt. It's less of a question; it's more of a lead for the client to take and run with, and I don't know the other person on the other side of the call. I'm meeting them for the first time. We don't have a rapport. So there is going to be an awkward break after I put out the prompt where, you have to be quiet and let them sit in that awkward silence that you also have to share with them for a moment so that they start talking. It's a game of chicken. Somebody's going to start talking. And, it is a hard thing to change your personal way of speaking when you've been doing it your whole life. So I also found the experience humbling, but the power of it really is that you're able to extract the information from the client the way that they're telling it, instead of filling that dead air with nudges to get to an answer that maybe implicitly you're thinking of yourself. We all have our own personal biases, and when you're in a known or unknown anxiety inducing situation, you're going to start grabbing lifelines, and my lifeline is to sell through that dead air, and the client's lifeline is going to be to spill it, and we need that. So here I go again. I'm feeling the dead air. I'm just going to shut up.
Great. Thanks, Adam. It was all good stuff, though. Now, Ken, I'm going to throw you a curveball because I can. So we've talked a lot about interviewing as one of the 6 methods. And I know you've been involved in doing research with clients that includes other methods. So, but again, through the same lens, your personal experience of doing that and what it kind of feels like to you of perhaps the walkthrough method or some other method that you've been using yourself.
Look, and since you're throwing me a curveball, I'm going to do what everybody who gets interviewed does. I'm going to answer the question I want to answer in the way I want to answer it, whether it's what you wanted or not.
I'm asking you an unbiased, open-ended question.
Look, the ability to use a method like this means that you're giving control of the interview over to somebody else. Right. As a journalist, and I was a journalist, as a reporter for decades, when I went into an interview, I pretty much knew what I wanted to get out of it. Right. I wanted them to tell me stuff that probably they shouldn't be telling me. And I wanted to tell them to tell it to me on the record, and I wanted them to tell it to me in a way that I could quote them, right, and be able to build a story out of it. And while this was different in terms of being open-ended and all that kind of stuff and unbiased, really it was the same thing. Right? I want to build a product because people tell me I want this. I want to demonstrate what we've built based upon what this initial input is that they've given us. So now ask them a question and just let them go, right? Let them talk and talk and talk and talk and do and drag and ask questions and play. It's fun, right? Because you're letting somebody not just tell you what they want, you're getting them to show you what they want. And that's just more valuable. And again, as I said, it's more fun. So, as I said in my intro to when you asked me, Michael, when we started this, I was really skeptical. When you said I want you to do this, I said, yeah, right. But as we've did, and as you know, because you've worked with me a long time, you know that I love to be right. So in this case, I have to admit that I'm pretty happy that I was wrong about it, because it really has worked out well.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that, and I'll remind you of that as we get into the project some more. But...
I'll deny it. I'll deny ever having said it.
All right, so one last topic, and then we'll open up for questions, and that's the effect that all this has, in your guys' opinion, on the broader organization. What is the longer term effect on the broader Bloomberg organization of having a campaign around learning about customers, of having methods to improve on that? What do you think some of the impact might be on the longer term life of the company? So first, let's start with Suzanne.
Sure. I think the number one impact is going to be that ultimately we build better product, right? We are in an ever increasing competitive environment. There are startups around every corner where we turn that touch some area of our business. And, we have a need now to respond to those and respond to, our customer need quickly. And, we have a limited number of resourcers, researchers for such a large organization. And, our demand on you was quite intense. And this, I think, democratization of the UX process means that we can spend some time upfront with a researcher to help conduct and set the framework for the study. And then you let the product team off into the wild, if you will, to go conduct those interviews and to do their research. And you can help us distill back, what it really means and how we then want to put it into plan. But it means we can move faster as an organization, in my opinion, to really meet the needs that we see in the market.
Excellent. Thanks, Suzanne. And Adam, turning to you, same question. What do you think the longer term impact of all this will be?
I think it's going to ultimately lead to better customer service and better education within the organization. For so long, knowledge has been very top heavy in this organization. And, like Ken initially mentioned, we have all these people internally who used to have these roles that our clients had. And because of that, the product team, who I'm thinking of in this regard, was really the keeper of all the secrets. What do the clients want? What do they actually do? By flipping it around and saying, having the product managers learn what the clients want and educate the rest of the organization, not just from an engineering or UX perspective, but, internally selling these ideas from the perspective of the client to other product teams, as well as sales and support folks who are then going to be the frontline folks who are going to be speaking with the clients when they come in through our help desk and go out and pitch the solutions to the clients that we've developed. You really do, I know the panel name is Democratization of UX Research. You really do democratize what the client workflow is. So I think that only has positive ramifications beyond the product itself being better. More educated people in the organization from top to bottom that know the client workflow inside and out has, untold benefits. And, as somebody who has taught a lot of people within this organization, I think raising the knowledge level is in our best interest. And this is a great way to approach it.
Great. Thank you, Adam. And Ken, because you dodged the last curveball, I've got another one for you. Slight variation on the question, but coming back to something you said earlier about using the voice of the customer to help manage stakeholders and the cohesion that brings in those relationships, but also in the project team, as Adam put it, engineers or product managers, colleagues, other people that own other parts of the platform, bringing them together around some common idea. Can you reflect on that for us, how this approach is kind of bringing more cohesion in the organization?
Yeah, Mike, I'm sorry. Usually I don't have an answer for everything. It's too early for me to tell what that's going to do for the organization. Especially long term. I can't. I'm not smart enough to know what's going to happen long term. I can tell you something that's happened immediately, though. I've got clients who we've interviewed coming to me and coming to the people in sales that asked us to interview them and saying, so when's it going to be ready? When can I see it? Can I be interviewed again? Can you please, I want to talk to you more about this. I have some other ideas. So I don't know about the cohesion internally. That's going to happen whether, it's going to happen one way or the other, either, voluntarily or involuntarily. It's going to happen, right? You've got to get work done. What it has done immediately is allowed our clients, the people that we're interviewing, to have a stake in the product that we're developing. It's not just that they have asked us to do this. It's that now they are part of the outcome. They're part of the community. And that's got all kinds of benefits that you can just begin to imagine. So I'm sorry I'm not answering your question, but I did answer the question I wanted to answer.
Great. No, that's great. I appreciate it, Ken. And good points. And now what we're going to do is open up for questions from our audience. And I've got a couple here that are coming through on the chat. You can use the chat on the right-hand side, or you can use the ask a question button at the bottom. And I've got a question here. This one's for you, Ken, because you're closest in terms of product. In what particular areas in news media is UX research essential?
Look, there's so many ways to tell a story. What is journalism about? Journalism is about telling stories, right? And it used to be that the only way to tell a story was with a headline and a lead and then supporting paragraphs and maybe a picture. UX is now part of the reporting and editing and publishing process. If you want to go up for an award in journalism and you don't have a multimedia package that goes along with your printed words, or vice versa, you're not even going to be considered. So the UX design in terms of presenting news is now expected. It's not a nice to have. If you don't have it, you're not taking advantage of all the different opportunities to tell a story the best. And remember that the consumers of this, and this is whether it's news or any other sort of platform, we need to be cognizant that people absorb information in different ways, and we all know this intellectually, right? But now we really need to think about it. Am I going to deliver a product that's just on a flat panel that's on somebody's desk? Am I going to deliver it on a flat panel and on a mobile phone? Am I going to do it in something that speaks to me in terms of a blog so I can listen to it while I'm driving to work, et cetera, et cetera? So UX is no longer just kind of, okay, can we do something alongside this news product? It is the news product.
Right. Great. Thank you, Ken. So I think the short answer to that was everywhere. So in another question here, and this is about our advice to, if another organization wanted to spread this UX research campaign and get other parts of the organization doing it in this democratized way, how would we suggest they get started? Now, I can take a stab at that just to get that started and then hand over to the rest of the group here. There's a number of checkboxes that you need to tick, I think, in order to have a successful effort at this. It's not about training. It's not about giving tools out. It's not about changing a particular approach. It's all of those things. It's about having a campaign whose goal is to increase the amount of connectedness we have as a product development organization to our clients. And the training part and the development of methods and people using those and sharing those experiences is just part of that effort. So some of the other things you need to have in place, I highly recommend getting your senior stakeholders involved, excited. Maybe they have programs already in place that this can be attached to, this sort of approach can attach to. I'd be very surprised if most organizations don't have something going on about how can we build better product, or about how can we address a new market, or any of these things. Learning about customers can support many of those things. So find a program to attach to, get senior stakeholder buy-in. That's number one. Number two, I would definitely say multidisciplinary team approach. Get the audience, the customers of this work are the product managers and the engineers. Get them involved as equal partners in developing it. And that means right at the beginning, laying out the scope, just like it's a product and we would do for any other kind of design. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What are some possible ideas? Sharing that, running pilots, gathering feedback, all of the things that we're purporting to do, we have done on this campaign as well. And that's going to ensure a better product. It's going to ensure a better outcome at the end of the day. And most importantly, if the goal is more connectedness to our customers in our product development activities, then having the people that are doing that across the board involved in this kind of campaign is going to make that happen. The third, I would say, is have some way to understand how this is all having an impact. So we are capturing case studies. We are capturing all the research in a repository. We are having sessions where that information is being shared amongst product managers and engineers. We're reporting that back up the chain of the organization so that the senior executives are aware of the impact that we're having. Ultimately, the impact, of course, is on the quality of the user experience, and we're putting in place as well to make that more robust. But have some way to know that the thing is having an impact. Measure the impact on the audience. Run surveys, run group sessions to listen to the customers, in this case, the people taking training or being part of the campaign, and find out if you're hitting the mark and if you need to make any adjustments. It's a product just like any other. So that's how I would answer that question. I want to open it up to the panel. Anybody else trying to do this in the audience, what advice would you give to them? So anybody dive.
Sure. I would just add to the second point you made, which is include the teams of people that will be ultimately consumers of this training class in not just the construction of the program itself and gathering feedback, but also in the delivery. I think as someone who's gone through the training, I found it much more engaging than just having someone preach at us what methods are. But instead, we mixed a balance of what the methods are with real use cases and examples from the different product areas. So from my colleagues, we were hearing stories. One of those sessions was a session where Ken talked about his experience in, what he learned in doing those initial interviews. And that is so much more impactful, I think, in terms of gathering and building buy-in amongst the team, that this is a worthwhile experience.
Great, thank you. Another question coming in here. How important is empathy in UX design, given that people absorb information in different ways? And how do you go about it? I think they mean, how do you go about ensuring that you have empathy for the customer? Kind of relates to the topic of this panel in general, but I wondered if perhaps, Adam, you could give us another example of that theme you had about leaving yourself behind and being open to the customer.
Yeah, I suppose I have a bit of a unique perspective on this, because I've never been a practitioner. I've never shared the role of our clients. So anytime I'm having a conversation with a client or a non-client, somebody I'm just trying to learn more from, if you don't have empathy, you're kind of not going to get very far, because there really is no fallback. There is no net of like my own experiences to rely on. My value to the product organization is the fact that I have talked to clients for almost a decade now, and I am now not just speaking with them, but I am actively listening to them and trying to hear their pain points. So I think one of the hardest things when it comes to empathy is getting others who don't hear what the client is saying to understand and empathize with the situation that the client is facing, when they might not be as educated on the challenges that the client faces. So recently, I've become a very active Visio user. Ken and I have worked together. He's seen me beat my head against the wall making flow diagrams within Excel. I've stepped up my game, and I've taken it to Visio. And recently I've been doing a lot of workflow mapping and putting, just making simple diagrams of, okay, the information's over here. It needs to get over to here. There's a big red X in the middle of it, and it's hard. And I've gone so far as to to Google for puke emojis, where like this is a disgusting workflow, so that people can really see like, wow. And it sounds silly that I do all of these little clip art type of graphics, but at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you personally are hearing what the client's pain point is, whether that's a waste of time or just general inefficiency that they wish wasn't there. Even if they don't say explicitly what it is, you can pick up a lot on body language, and then recommunicating that back to the organization so that everybody feels that client's pain. Because if we're not living and breathing their problems, how are we solving them? So empathy is right at the core of it, with everything.
Absolutely. I'd answer it a slightly different way if I could. And Adam, I don't disagree with anything you say, especially about the Visio stuff. But the one thing that we can't buy any more of is time, right? And I think that we can't underestimate how much value our clients are giving us. They're spending their time, and sometimes it's a significant amount of time. There's some people that we've spoken to for hours, right? This is a big investment on their part. And what this does, at least for me, is make me appreciate the relationships that we're building with our clients even more, because again, they're giving us something that they can never get back. Now, hopefully what we build for them, right? They're making this is not just because they're nice people, right? They're hoping that there's going to be a significant return on their investment. They're investing their time because they expect that we're going to build something for them that is going to save them even more time. So in terms of empathy, we need to appreciate that they are giving us a very finite resource, and we need to understand that what we need to build is something that's going to give them that return on investment.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And here's one more question that relates to the use of technology. So very topical with us all doing this kind of research remotely. With regards to creating silence to encourage the stakeholders to talk. And this is a question for Adam and then to Suzanne, because I know you've already reflected a little bit on this. With regard to that silence, encouraging them to talk, do you find this harder to do or less effective in Zoom meetings compared to in person? Two-part question. And have you developed any techniques to accomplish this over Zoom or similar video conference technology? So is it harder to do or less effective in Zoom compared to an in-person meeting?
Definitely easier on Zoom. In person, there is a natural tendency towards banter, and you want to get to know the person and potentially form a real relationship with that person, that they might have you back in the future, back into their office. They've invited you into their space. I mean, the same would apply if you were in that person's living room. In person is a completely different experience. Virtually, I don't know that I've developed a real method, but I have a very loud keyboard. I've been told by many colleagues that are on video conferences with me that when I type notes, it is extremely loud. So what I've been doing is muting myself after I've asked my question almost instantly, so that I can, even if I want to talk, I have to take another step in my own personal workflow of asking that question. And that, either consciously or unconsciously, it's not a big step because I just have to click a button. But I literally mute myself and I shut up forcibly. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but definitely easier to conduct these interviews over a video sharing software.
That's great, Adam. Physically make yourself shut up. Good. Suzanne,
I'd second what Adam said, in that we have found it easier virtually than in person, in terms of leaving the space for that pause. And I would say it literally takes nothing more than patience. You just have to literally hold yourself back. As a mother with young children, I find that, they've steeled me for this type of battle, right? There's a battle of the wills when it comes to who's going to break down first when someone's in trouble. So, I just bring that personal experience into real life, and just make sure that, if you find yourself going to speak before they've answered your question, to really take 2 seconds and say, wait a minute, I haven't gotten a response.
It is a great question, and that was from Anthony Hornoff. Anthony, if you're involved in doing UX research or any kind of studies that could reveal to us the pros and cons of doing research virtually, I think you might be onto something with that question, that clearly there are some benefits to doing it, and we've touched on a few of those. The mute button I hadn't thought of as being a benefit, but the fact that lots of folks can join in and listen directly from customers has been huge for us during this otherwise challenging year or so, where you can have 30 people on the call listening in. You let the client know that they are only interacting with 1 or 2 people, but you let them know there's folks listening in, and getting that firsthand, and then having a conversation about it afterwards, to debrief and to explore what people have heard, getting those folks engaged in looking at the notes and analyzing the information. What that all means, Anthony, is that at the end of the process, there is not a UX research report. That has already been taken care of. The team has already understood the customer, has already worked out its evidence that it's collected across interviews in this case. It's already worked out what its findings are and discussed as a team the implications of that. There is no need for a report, which is difficult. It has its own difficulties, because now you have to have a transfer of information that might be not as impactful as actually participating in that. And that's really what the technology has allowed us to do, is go from having product managers, and this program has allowed us to do, is having product managers as recipients of client research, to being observers of that client research, and now participants in it. And that's what has made that connection between the organization and its customers much stronger, much more methodical, more robust, systematic, clear, transparent. And that's kind of where we've been able to get to. So I've got one more question here in the queue. Thank you, Anthony, from Mary Chan. Mary's question is, have you had any experience in running UX clinics for teams as a light touch scale-up method, or does this run counterintuitive to the premise that UX expertise should be baked deeply into projects from the beginning? Mary, I can take that first. Yes, we've included sort of hands-on consulting type approach on projects. We've included running where there's a bunch of projects kicking off all at once, and getting product managers together in order to remind them of techniques and tools and whatnot. Where there's a specific need, we've done that kind of ad hoc clinic approach. So yeah, I mean, as I said, the campaign is not done when it's just the training is completed. It's a long-term effort to keep pushing on this theme of learning about customers in a more reliable way. And one of the tips I didn't mention, if you're thinking about this kind of program, is to not only get product managers and engineers to participate and drive the thing forward, actually, but also to keep engaged, hand-holding where possible, take my hand kind of approach, being available, offering more advice as we go along. Typically, there'll be a UX person somewhere close to a project, even if right now, for example, I'm involved in 3 major research projects. One is the one that Ken was talking about. Another is one that Adam is involved in. Another that's looking at a whole new area of the business for us. And I am not doing any of those client interviews. I'm not doing any of those client walkthroughs. I'm advising the team on all different aspects of the process. I may have done some of the interviews at the beginning, and we've debriefed on that. But it's very much a kind of multifaceted approach to keeping this thing going. All right, so I think we are out of questions and more or less out of time. We could take one more as we get into 2:54 here. I think we were supposed to be finished by 3 o'clock. Anthony responded here by, yes, my one-on-one interviews, such as the one I did in class yesterday to show students how to interview, still go great. Yes, thank you, Anthony. Yeah, so still part of the, the overall package, being hands-on. I can throw in a question that I heard the other day with reference to this whole effort that that I think is really pertinent, and that's if we democratize client research in the organization such that over a number of years, lots and lots of people are involved in it. There is a surge of client insights coming into the product development process, and the quality of the product is getting better and better every day because of it. Is there still a need for UX research per se? And I'm not going to answer that question because I'm biased, but I'm going to ask Suzanne to answer that for us. If everyone's doing it, Suzanne, why do we need a specialism?
Oh, because we are not experts at it, right? We are learning, and I think we're getting better at it. But I don't envision a world where we don't need the guidance of our researchers to make sure we're on the right track, to make sure we're framing our questions when we start these projects in the right way, so that we're getting back the results and the insights that we're looking for, and really to help us distill down to make sure that we don't introduce any of our bias. You know, both in the interview process, but also in the analysis of the data. You know, make sure that we're being really clear in what we're our findings really are. So no, I personally don't think that goes away anytime soon, ever actually.
Right, great. And
I'd answer it a slightly different way, Michael. I would say that if this is successful, and look, this is an if, right? We're still experimenting, so I can't say that we've concluded ultimately that this is the way to do things better, but this is, it certainly looks promising. If it does work out, it's going to create the need for more UX people at our company, because it means that instead of building, I'm robbing your quote, the idea that if you invest $1 today and get it right, it's going to, if you don't do it right, it's going to cost you $100 later to change it, right? So if this proves out, and if it works out the way we anticipate it, it means that we'll have slower starts to projects, but we won't waste so much time on the back end or in KTLO or in redoing the damn thing because we did it wrong the first time. So that means that even if it's a slower start, it means a better finish, which means that Suzanne and Adam and I and all of our colleagues are going to have more time to do more products, which means that we're going to be requiring more of your time. So get ready. Great,
because I was twiddling my thumbs wondering what I'm going to do tomorrow. Great. Thanks very much, Ken. So we are pretty much out of time. I'm going to close there, but first let you all know in the audience that we'll be dropping into the Chi corridor called Kobe. KOBE. So you can join us there for conversation. I think it's conversation. I haven't been in the corridor yet. I assume it is. Nothing dark alley-ish, I hope, but we'll join you there and we can answer more questions about the program, about our experiences, about how we went about executing this. So on that note, the only thing left for me to do is thank our panelists, who I think have been wonderful, but I'm biased. Great stuff. Thanks for participating, and also to our audience for joining us today. As I said, any more questions, any more conversation, we will see you in Kobe.